Reuven Baruch, let's learn Parshas Boy together. A common misconception that people have is that in the olden days, people did not know as much as we do today about the cycles of the heavenly bodies, the stars, the moon, the sun. So they needed eyewitnesses to testify to the first visibility of the new moon in order to know when Rosh Chodesh should be. Just again, back when we had a Beis Hamikdash and we had a Sanhedrin, although we might know when the new moon started, it wasn't officially declared as such until witnesses came from. They used to come from the Galil, and it would take a day or two, and there would be a whole business. So we would think, well, that's because they didn't have any computers. They didn't have any, we have advanced knowledge of astronomy and mathematics, and we can have an app for that, and all we needed. So what? We don't need any witnesses. We know when Rosh Chodesh is. That's a major misconception. Okay. Back in the olden days, the heavenly cycles were very well known and studied and understood. The position of the Levana of the moon was known at all times. In fact, the Rambam says that it is a mitzvah incumbent upon the Sanhedrin, that's the high court, to make the necessary calculations in order to be able to tell if the witnesses actually saw what they claim to have seen. This means that the witnesses came to Yerushalayim through thick and thin to testify, to give edus to what the Sanhedrin already knew. If the court determined that the new moon would not be visible on a certain evening, then they did not even receive witnesses. Hundreds of witnesses could come and testify on that night, each wanting to swear that he saw the new moon. It won't move the Sanhedrin. According to halacha, they don't move to do more than just double check their own calculations. Unlike other kinds of testimony, where witnesses come to testify to the truth that is unknown to the judges, right? Here we have just the opposite. The witness thinks he saw the first visibility of the new moon, yet he really probably didn't, because it doesn't match the calculations. The moon at this time of the month, beginning of the new month, is showing a very small chip of light, too small to be called a crescent, very low on the horizon, where visibility is its poorest. Shortly after sunset, when the sky is not really dark yet, for a short period of time before the moon sets. So clouds, ground haze, pollution, fog, trees, buildings, all these other obstructions would block the new moon. They wouldn't see the moon. We live in big cities. Sometimes we don't see stars for people. Kids come to the country. They see stars and what is all that? They never saw it before. That's all because of the haze of light that lays on top of a city. So yeah, here we have a situation. All this time the Sanhedrin and anyone else with the knowledge of astronomy will know exactly when the new moon is. We know now. We don't have a Sanhedrin. So how do we know when the new moon is? Because there's calculations. So if the Sanhedrin knew when to expect as witnesses, why did they need witnesses? Right? What did you need them for? Why do we want these people to schlep when we know what they are going to say before they do? And secondly, they are less reliable than our calculations. And just to think for a minute, when we're going to do this when we have a Sanhedrin, when the Mashiach comes. And we're going to return to these primitive methods of doing things. So something's going on here that we're missing the point. These witnesses, what's really going on here? If the Sanhedrin knew, and if someone came and said something that what they knew calculation-wise it wasn't possible, they would say no. So what's going on here? What was the whole pantomime about? So there's a medrash that describes the onslaught, this week's Parsha, the onslaught of the plague of frogs. Originally, says the medrash, there was just one big mother frog, a big frog. Thinking the Egyptians, they thought, the Mitzrayim thought, we'll nip the things by the bud. So they took a stick and they started hitting the frog. Right? They were attempting to kill the frog. Stop it where it started. Yet each time they would strike it, instead of dying, the giant frog simply multiplied. Right? Now, at first, this must have come to them as quite a surprise. I give the thing a zet. He comes out 4. I mean, what's going on here, right? But as time wore on, this kept going. They would keep clapping and clapping. The novelty wore off. And one would have to have thought that the Mitzrayim might have seen the pattern emerging and stopped striking the frogs. Because every time they struck it, more came. So that they were increasing their own plague upon themselves. Yet they didn't. They kept clapping and clapping. Foolish, imbecilic. Yet, how often does this happen to us? We have a problem that we have to sort out. It's there. It's obvious, staring us in the face. Yet instead of dealing with the problem analytically, with seichel, with what we call yeshiva das, we actually add to it because we get wound up, tied up. And then even as we act, we know we're doing, this isn't working for me. And I get more, but you get more entangled. And what could have been a minor point now becomes an obsession almost, right? And so we wind a web of tzoros even tighter around us. So what may have started as a relatively small and manageable challenge in spiritual things, now we're working in this man of Shabbat, which talks about people, how to act, how to look at things, how to watch and not watch things that are not meant to be seen, to have modesty. And it's a challenge for a lot, especially in our society today. So sometimes we get so caught up in this challenge that it becomes a monster. And we can't, as much as we say no and I change and I do, and it gets stronger. So tshuva, repentance, it's not simply knowing what to do. It's the decision to make a change for better and take the actions to make it happen. To stop things from spiraling out of control, preferably before we have a serious plague to deal with. So Chazal, our sages, put it this way: Loi ha-medrash ha'ikar, ela ha-ma'asa. Knowing what to do isn't the main point. The main point is doing it. Commentators write that the mitzvah of sanctifying, of bringing being mechadish the levana, the new moon, is an allusion to tshuva. So we rejoice in the emergence of renewed light, however small, even that little chink of light, from what we had before, which was total darkness. And although at first small, light is destined, in a relatively short time, to develop into a full-fledged Lavana moon, which is a light up the whole nighttime. Nothing can hold a person back from doing tshuva. Not his childhood, not his family, not his financial standing, not his life history, his nisyonos, stuff that happened, not even the moment just before now. Nothing. If your past resembled the spiraling spring, winding and burying itself deeper and deeper, then use that built-up tension to catapult yourself to new heights before it becomes unreachable. Now's the time. In fact, in some sense, the further back the spring is pulled, the greater potential, which is kind of encouraging. Because the more there is, the more power I could put into to coming back to Hashem. From darkness, a new light emerges. Perhaps this is why, for everything Sanhedrin knew, they could not declare a new moon without testimony of witnesses. When it comes to tshuva, which is what this is all about, knowledge alone will not suffice. There must be conscious decision to get up and do something. Get up and you travel to Yerushalayim. Make that decision. Say the witnessing. To abandon self-defeating ways, challenges that seem to have gotten the better of us. We get ourselves moving on the right track by getting yourself up, saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not just going to be passive at it. You have to make that decision. And taking the first serious step, that's the hardest part. But after that, the sailing gets much smoother, much smoother. So this is the secret. This is the secret of the witnesses that have the item that had to come. Because we, Klal Yisrael, have to take the first step to create the light of tshuva within our lives. The Irish is a helping. We should all take this time of Shavuot, which is a very spiritual time of the year. It's dark. It's the darkest part of the year. And now through this happens of COVID, it's a difficult time. People are suffering. Not only from the illness, but the fear, and the children are stuck at home. And we have a tremendous nisyonos. So what do? Be machadish, schadjes, an eye levudna, some more light. Bring it in, make it warm, make your heart open. The aim schus will get past all this. This shall pass. That which is a help in Bakula. And we'll be in Yerushalayim, Aish Kodesh, with the Mashiach zusammen, and we're tanzen in Yerushalayim again. So it's wahr, so geht. Kol tov.